All right, hey everyone, welcome to I don't know which episode this is. I feel like I need to like do one of those TikTok videos where they're like, "Hey, part like 764." I think this is the fifth WTF conversation. I'm so happy you're here. Today we are talking about all things recruiting tech with Kyle and Sammy. Who are awesome. You're gonna love them. Really quick housekeeping. My name is Brandice. I work here at Gem and am your host. Let's talk about the chat really quick. So there's public chat and then there's session chat. Some folks end up in different places. I like the session chat. So head over to the session chat tab on the right side of your screen. There you can talk to each other. You can talk to me. You can talk to our other panelists. You can ask questions. There's also a Q&A section as well. So I'll try to keep an eye on both. But the whole point of everything I'm saying right now is that I want you to ask questions. I want you to interact. We will try to provide insights and all of these wonderful things, but also you guys can learn from each other. So let's get in the chat and say what's up to everyone. So without further ado, if this is your first WTF, we started off the same way every time. I'm not going to disappoint you and not do it this time as well. But first, I'm going to bring our panelists on. So let's welcome Kyle and Sammy. And it's spinning and they're coming and it's like a really big, there we go. Hey guys.
Hey.
How's it going? As you know, you are here to talk about recruiting technology, yes?
Wait.
What? Sweet. So first up, we have Sammy Reardon from One Medical. Sammy, let the people know who you are.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Sammy Reardon. My pronouns are she, her. I've spent the last 13 years recruiting here at One Medical. And for those of you that actually don't know about One Medical, we are a technology-powered primary care practice. So we offer both virtual and in-office primary care to our patients. And our mission is simply to transform healthcare for all through a human-centered and technology approach. So I have the pleasure of leading our TA team that focuses on the end-to-end hiring and strategy for hiring all of our clinicians across our 200 offices across the whole country.
Listen, Sammy, if anyone else is on from One Medical and we're questioning or worried that you didn't understand the company's mission, you have just proven it.
Thank you. Practiced my elevator pitch many of times in those 13 years.
Like, surprise, this is actually a test and not a webinar. Thank God, you get to keep your job, girl. Hey, you should tell everybody you were also the first. Didn't you say you were the first recruiter there too?
I was the first recruiter there. One of the first 50-ish or so people as well.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, Sammy, I'm glad you're here. I know you have wonderfully smart things to say to all the folks watching today. If you don't know Kyle, here's Kyle. Kyle, who are you?
Hi, my name's Kyle. I'm the head of strategy and principal analyst at a research firm called Aptitude. We are woman-owned and woman-founded by Madeline Lorano, and we are here in Boston. And I get to I have a really fun job. I get to study innovation cycles in the world of work. I study like what new things are coming out of the vendor landscape and what emerging trends are occurring on the practitioner side. And my job is to kind of like mediate between the two and help folks like y'all figure out how to make the most of what's going on in the space. And then folks on the vendor side, I'm telling them like what they need to build to actually help solve problems. I have been in the practitioner seat too. I was part of a transformation project at General Motors in talent acquisition. It was a really exciting time when they were moving to their fully electric future. And then I have also been on the vendor side. I was a head of strategy at Beamery from Series B to C, which was, both of those were really brutal tours in the different sides of the ecosystem. But I love it. I am so excited to spill the tea on this topic. It's going to be fun.
Got my tea.
Hi, everyone. This is Kyle. We love Kyle. Kyle's great. If you're multitasking right now, stop. And I'm going to ask Kyle and Sammy a question. I also want to hear from you because this is helping me compile this like massive playlist that hopefully gives everyone a lift throughout the week whenever I can actually put it together and then share it. But don't worry about that. So I want to know what song this week or let's say in the last couple weeks, is getting you through your WTF moments? Sammy, I'm going to start with you.
Oh gosh. So I'm not shy to admit this, but when I'm not recruiting, I have 2 kids at home. So I'm either hanging out with them or I'm listening to Taylor Swift. So I have to respond. I have to respond with a Taylor Swift song. And the one that comes to mind is Shake It Off. One of the reasons why I love working in TA is I find we are all a rare breed of superhuman, very resilient people. Let's face it, our job is not easy. So yeah, when I am having those WTF moments, Taylor is telling me to shake it off. So that's kind of my go-to.
All right, for all you Swifties out there, Sammy's got your back. Kyle, what are you listening to?
So a couple of things. I'm an emo kid. Like if I'm a Cancer, if I'm in my feelings, I'm gonna listen to really sad, sappy music and be like, yes, and it really gets my endorphin dolphins swimming. And so I'm not typically a girl band boy, but Casey Musgrave's Deeper Well lately is just, I'm driving in the car. The first time it comes on, I'm like, oh my God, did she write this song for me? So love that one. And then I love Vampire Weekend so much. And they have a new album coming out and they have this new single called Capricorn. And it just gives me everything I want from Vampire Weekend. I can't wait for them to announce their tour so that I can be there. Yeah, endorphin dolphins, Amy, use it. They're always like swimming in my blood. I like to talk about them. Anyway.
I love that, Kyle. I didn't know you were Cancer. I'm also a Cancer. I'm a June baby. So nice. Big hearts to you. Cool. Well, let's talk about recruiting technology. All right. So we did this study. We didn't do a study. Sorry, I'm lying. We did some research. And we were looking at the vendor landscape. And back in 2015, like you could pick a tool super fast because there were only around 160 vendors on the market. Now it's 2024, but last year in 2023, it's like trying to find your kid at Coachella. There's 550 vendors out there. And they're all vying for your attention, and they're all telling you that they're going to fix your problems and solve all your recruiting challenges. Some do, some don't. Well, we'll talk about that later. But how are we supposed to choose? Can we just start there? I know that's a big question. Where do you start? Sammy, where did you start?
No, listen, I think, as TA leaders, I think we know our strengths and our blind spots better than anyone. So, I mean, what kind of comes to mind is jumping right into looking at strategy and forecasts and understanding sort of what are you solving for? What are sort of your ins and outs for your year? What what tool is optimizing for what? And so, when I start, I always go back to like, what are the business problems I'm solving? And keeping that top of mind when making any sort of decision around a tool. And will this tool serve me hopefully in years to come? But it might also just be right now, and that's okay too.
Sammy, I feel like at the end there is like, that brings me so much. It triggers me because it reminds me of just how much pain we've been through and how many problems, like urgent, everything has been so urgent all the time for the last several years. But Brandice, I feel like that is what has gotten us to this place where the market is, I would say, bloated with solutions. I used to say dynamic and now I say bloated because everything's on fire all the time. And especially in industries like healthcare and in hospitality and retail. But we do, I think, have a problem when we try to like whack-a-mole. Like anytime a head pops up, we're like, bam, a new tool, bam, a new tool. It was a lot easier when like budgets were a little bit like less constrained. But recruiting tech stacks have always been pretty full of stuff. Which is just so funny because we never feel like we're fully resourced, but we actually have a lot more tools than most of our peers in the rest of HR. But Sammy, I think you're spot on. Like, where do you start? You start with your problems, and they can't be just like the problem du jour. And I think that's the habit that we have fallen into a couple of times. We really need to look at like core operational problems that align to our strategic priorities in TA, but hopefully those priorities are also aligned to HR and to the business. But yeah, I mean, I think about things like data integrity or candidate experience or hiring manager experience or recruiter workload management, like fundamental things, and not something like we need more women in our tech pipeline, which is a problem, right? But I don't need to rush to resource that. I need to investigate that problem and find out what's going on.
Yeah. So, no, sorry, really. So if you look, what I hear you guys saying, it's like people, process, technology, right? Like where's the overlap? Like what solves what? Sammy, I didn't mean to cut you off, and I'm sorry. I hope we're still friends, but I do want to say, like, when you bring up the fire, like everything's on fire all the time. Where does the fire, like, who's creating the fire? Like, who do we need to blame? Because if we can figure out why is everything an emergency all the time right now? Like, I have an opinion on this, but I won't lead the witness, but I'm interested in what you think about it.
Right, Andrew, I totally agree. See the strategy, who isn't creating the fires? Yeah, Sammy, I might start since I'm out. I'm not in the practitioner seat. I don't want you to get in hot water. You can say like +1, But I mean, honestly, their fires are all over the place. And unfortunately, sometimes it is the business acting with like an extreme urgency out of nowhere, And so like we always talk about like, oh, recruiting needs to be proactive and less reactive. We are constantly reacting to whatever they throw at us. And we have to. We're a delivery team, right? We don't own the hiring plan. We just like deliver on it. But then I will also throw this little spicy nugget out there. I think sometimes we create the problems, and I'm not necessarily saying the heads of TA, but sometimes it's rank and file. I mean, like they're feeling a lot of friction. I like have been there and I experienced it. But I think we have kind of lost this feeling of like team dynamic and like supporting one another. And so sometimes it's like the problem that I'm feeling, I'm going to ring the bell and like really raise hell over it. And in reality, it's like, well, one thing I have learned in my professional career that's really, I think, helped me is I remember I used to complain all the time because I would see problems everywhere. And my boss, it wasn't that they didn't want me to keep looking for opportunities to improve, but they said, stop bringing me problems and bring me solutions. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, so if I am seeing a lot of problems, maybe I can come and say, hey, I identified this, I investigated this, and I think that there's something that we can do. Like, there's a bigger difference than just like, I'm like, none of these candidates are good. Like the CRM doesn't work, or I'm not getting anything from sourcing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, that's the beginning. Let's keep going. Let's pull at that thread. But Sammy, what do you think?
No, I agree. And I think that is also where, I mean, we've been fortunate enough, or I will say, to sort of work with thought partners and leaders. I think having, again, to your point, Kyle, this is not just always a TA problem. Sometimes it's an organizational problem of like having all of the people come to the table to help support TA in some of these things. Again, I think having a clear forecast is really important to determine what tools are necessary, and having really good data is king. Or queen, I should say. It is so important. And again, those decisions do inform what tools, and I think they inform what strategy, and they need to be really sound. And I think we as TA leaders need to also advocate for getting that information. Again, to your point, Kyle, I think providing solutions, and again, researching tech that might provide those solutions, but also recognizing it's a multi-pronged approach, and it's more than just a TA problem. It's, a company problem.
Do you think, Sammy, that we in general are good at triaging some of those like fire drills? Or do you think we just kind of get stuck? I mean, because we are in constant delivery mode. It's just like we grab it and we go, we grab it and we go. And it's like when recs are always coming over the wall, and when somebody like just dumps a bunch on top of you. You just like keep going. I don't know. Like, what's your take on that?
I know I was having this conversation with my team member the other day because we were laughing that we were given this really big problem and we're like, of course we're going to go solve it. And the company will have learned nothing because we have delivered on the problem. Like we have figured it out. And, but yes, no, I do. I think sometimes we're just naturally again, that's why the resilience piece comes in. We're super resilient in finding solutions and creating that. But again, yeah, I think it's all about setting expectations there too, and what is deliverable and what is feasible. So
when you talk about the relationship between, Sam, you just mentioned this, the business learning nothing and TA solving problems, like when you have a bunch of recs dumped on you, right? And maybe you're under resourced, maybe you don't have the budget, maybe you don't have the right technology. But you, to Catherine's point, like our value is to be the solution. Like you're going to go solve that problem, but you don't have enough time and space to like do that, like solutioning or like problem mapping. And then on top of that, you have all of these things that you have to continue to do to keep the business running and keep butts in seats and all of those things. So like, have you been able to find a balance as you've been like, in my opinion, like you're looking for a more solid foundation of like, I just told you there's 550 vendors out there. There's somebody out there that's going to help you solve your problem, but like you need that time and space to figure out what your problem is. So how have you found a balance between articulating the problem to the business, finding the right solutions, and keeping the engine running?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I think again, it's, you know, in a finite world, I mean, it's like budget, right? I think, you know, when you think of having some constraints, it's also setting those constraints to the business and saying like, I can deliver on X, Y, and Z, like, you know, and giving sort of timelines and timeframes and setting expectations there. So again, yeah, to your point, I mean, a lot of these tools, like they require implementation, they require like a lot of support. And so in some of those, also advocating for, you know, is this a build or is this a person? Like, can we add more to the team or sort of their opportunities to do that instead of going right to tools?
One thing I wonder, like, is we are always in solution mode, right? I mean, it's like it's just where we live. It's how we operate. But the solutioning is almost still like focused on like the delivery. We're always solutioning on the work that's in front of us. Maybe it is a matter of like building some muscles. I had this really great interview with Hung Lee. Do you guys know Hung Lee, right? He's the head of recruiting Bring Food, like super smart guy. He talked about we need to actually start like running exercises of adverse impact, like preparing for chaotic moments. And so like it's almost like scenario training. And it got me thinking about like when I was prepping for this session, I was starting to wonder like maybe we like start embedding into our operating culture like a monthly meeting. Let's do a monthly meeting like problem solution statement. You know, like and assign it, delegate it to, you know, we're all problem solvers, delegate it to different parts of the recruiting organization, whether they're recruiters, coordinators, sourcers, maybe they are in recruiting ops, you know, whomever it is. And just task them. All right, Brandice, this month is your problem solution. So I would like come up with something. We can have a chat before to see if it's, you know, gonna hit the mark, but just kind of embedding a bit of this like scenario like planning into the way that we work can start lightweight. But I feel like if we wait until we have to build a business case for a major problem, then we're starting from scratch. And it's muscles that you know we haven't worked in a while or maybe ever, to be honest. So I just wonder if maybe there's a part of like embedding some of this like higher level solutioning and higher level of like problem solving into the way that we work.
Yeah, if you guys didn't hear that, Kyle said very eloquently, if you're waiting to have to build a business case for the problem, then can I paraphrase? You're kind of late. Okay.
You're very late. If you're not kind of late, you're very late.
So I feel like we've laid a good foundation for the conversation, which says like, yes, there are tools out there that can help you. We've established that. There's some internal and there's some inner child work that we have to do to lay out our problems as an organization before we can kind of look to what the right solutioning is. And Sammy, you mentioned budget is a big part of that. Kyle, everything you just said that I won't say again, all very great. Thank you for that. Let's talk about budget. So, and I understand that like this differs from whether you're like a global enterprise company or you're, you know, a mid-market company or maybe a smaller business. I get that this is not one size fits all. So forgive me for not solving everybody's problems today, but I would like to talk about you have tools, you have technology, and we were kind of like chatting about this yesterday about, you know, forced consolidation where your CFO or finance or whomever is like, we're spending too much money. We need to cut back on stuff. What can you cut? And you're like, well, I have this chat bot that sends a gift card to every candidate when they schedule an interview, like, and they're like, you don't need that, like throw that away. Okay. So there's nice to haves and then there's must haves. So what's your go-to method for deciding like which tools absolutely need to stay, where the overlap is, and then making decisions about like where to trim?
I can be honest, right?
Yes.
How many people in this session have seen 100% adoption of all of their tools? Girl, nobody. Ain't nobody seen 100% adoption. Exactly. Never. And so I think that's always a really great place to start is as soon as you get that request as a leader or as a manager or whatever, like as soon as you feel that heat and you get that question, I'm going to put out to my team and say, hey, guess what, team? The budget cuts are coming, and I am seeing 30% adoption of this tool that you all told me that you absolutely had to have. So where's the ROI, honey? Like, I'm not seeing it, and I'm not going to be able to defend it. And so thank you to the 12 of you who have been using it, and all of your colleagues owe you an apology because we're not able to keep it because nobody else used it. So I start to get really real right away of just looking to see what's getting utilized. Of course, your ATS had better be getting utilized, right? But we do know that a lot of people still love to do it their way. So they're still in their spreadsheets. But that is the first place that I start to look is like my core stuff. And I'll say core is ATS. I do believe CRM is core. Job marketing, like you can scale up and scale down, but it never completely goes away. Interview tools, like the core operational stuff, I'm going to go to the mat for. But anything on the edge that's not getting the amount of utilization that we need to defend that spend is totally fair game, whether I like it or not, regardless of how much time and energy we spent going to get it, implementing it, training on it. Like a lot of time is spent on these things, and for them not to get that utilization, it's demoralizing for us. And then like it gets even worse when that chopping block, it's, you know, that we're starting to cut, and it's like, really guys, we spent so much time on this.
Yeah. Sammy, you went through this exercise too. I know at one
point. Yeah, we did. And I think to Kyle's point too, my sort of philosophy is that if you can't tell an ROI on a tool within 3 clicks of like going into that tool, like that tool is not working for you, right? Like, you know, as leaders, like we should be able to on a daily basis. I mean, I do on a daily basis kind of look and see what activity the team is doing. And I think that was for me where some of the consolidation recently happened where, you know, there were some tools where I was like, I would have to reach out to our account manager to be like, wait, tell me again why I need this tool, or like, where can I find, because they didn't have an open API. They weren't integrated into our ATS. And so those were some of the cuts we made right away because we're like, this is not, even if the tool is effective, like we can't prove it. And of course, like you want a CFO that is, if you want a CFO that is asking you these questions, right? You hope that CFO is asking every other business leader the same questions. And so, you know, that was sort of where we consolidated some tools. And then, yeah, I mean, I know we're on a gem platform, and I will just, you know, I speak very highly of gem, but I think we actually at One Medical, I can share this because we left gem and then we came back to gem. And I think one of the reasons why I came back to gem was just seeing all of the things that gem had done in the years past. And I think that was another thing for us in a lot of these tools where it's like, they look the same way they did 5 years ago. And like, that is not serving a purpose. anymore. And so I will just say, I think that's sort of typically what I go to or I look at.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I
that's,
like that. Sorry, Brandice, do you mind if I continue to volley on that a little? It's your show.
Is it though? No, go ahead.
Thank you. I think that's a really great point, because what I'm starting to hear from you too, Sammy, is like the friction in the different. I look at tech as each one as a program, not as just like tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so friction in the program, and I really love what Charlie Davis Watkins has asked here in the chat, which is, there's a lot more to adoption than just whether your end users like it or not. And I think if I look at not necessarily just the tool or the system, if I look at the partnership with that vendor, and change management is not wholly on the project lead, like internally. It is, I think, shared responsibility with your solution provider partner. And if I'm not seeing, if I go back through my QBRs for any of my providers and it's all fluff, they're not really actually bringing any like real ideas to the table to help us make these programs mature and to help these programs thrive. If they keep pushing the problem of adoption back onto me entirely, like, well, that's also going to be on the chopping block. I need partners especially in this environment, when guess what? Like, heyday is over. Like, and now is the hard time when I need you to be my partner. And if you're not going to step up, like, or if you wait until this last minute to be like, oh no, we can suddenly we do have change management consultants that we can bring on site for you. And suddenly we do have like a whole course that we can roll out. Like, oh, well, where were you when I've been asking for this? So that's the other signal that I usually would take. I mean, again, there are core systems that are just too tough to rip and replace, but I don't think anything like an ATS is on the chopping block in this point. But so that those edge innovations, those specialized tools, we as leaders, we go out on a limb to give a startup like an opportunity. And at the end of the day, the learning might be for them that they didn't bring enough to that partnership. The tech alone is not enough to justify me going to bat for you.
I hear that. So before we move on, I like to try to go back and synthesize everything we just talked about for the last 20 minutes. But I do want to make sure that like the title of this conversation is the recruiting tools that you actually need. Cut the bulky stack is what I came up with. It was very cute. So if you were to rip everything out, and I'm not going to ask you to name names or name tools, but just like, what are like thank you, Jeffrey. What are the building blocks? Let's say you could tear it all down. What are the building blocks that you would say people should very succinctly say people should start with to actually get to the stack that they need, the tools that they need? It could be methodology, it could be technology.
Yeah, I'm going to go the more methodical route, because I think we here at One Medical have a very specific problem that we are constantly solving for, and it's activity at top of funnel. There's about a 50,000 provider primary care shortage, and like everything when we do in recruiting, we're always thinking about how do we make the pie bigger of primary care. And so for me, our tool and our tech stack is heavily weighted towards things that are generating candidates at top of funnel activity. And again, I will name tools because it's GEM, but like a CRM, a very functioning CRM that allows us to properly engage candidates is crucial. Things that are less relevant for us because of that problem are tools that are weeding out candidates or using AI to sort of match resumes, saying, no, they don't have these skills, X, Y, and Z. So again, when I think of what is critical for a tech stack, I do take a methodical approach to say what's always going to be your problem in the recruiting. And again, we have a very specific, specialized problem that's going to look different at other organizations. But in my 13 years that I've been doing this, that problem has not gone away. So it's a very, again, it's been sort of the thing that I focus on the most every day when I wake up is that CRM.
Yeah. I really like that approach too. I mean, it's again looking at perennial problems, looking at persistent problems, and solving for that. I mean, I also would wonder, like, to that end, like, okay, top of funnel, but ultimately you also do need that like, I don't know how complex your interview process is, and so if I know that I actually do have a heavy process, I'm going to need to make sure I design a tech stack that is going to, ease as much friction that it exists in a complex problem. So that means if we do need a tech assessment, I'm going to need that tech assessment to be legit and worth the candidate's time. And then I'm also going to need that tech assessment provider to seamlessly integrate into my ATS to get that assessment report back directly. And I'm going to need them to send it to my hiring manager. Like, I just know what I'm going to need to architect, like what kind of solution I'm going to need to architect. Because there are problems that we can, own, and there are problems that we inherit. And like, I'm going to try and make the most of both. I mean, for me, I always talk about the foundations are data, integrations, and AI automation. I think that understanding, now I'm not saying that you need 100% of all three. It's like, understand, what do I need of these three, like to what degree, and integrations, you might know, for example, that you don't have any IT resources, or extremely limited. And so, you can't have a very technically complex stack. You just can't, even though you would love to build your dream stack, you can't. And so, as you're evaluating options, you're going to have like quite literally out of the box integrations, and not taking every vendor at their word when they say that they are integrating out of the box. Like, you got to validate that, right? As soon as you want to change one thing, it's a custom integration. So I think it's just trying to figure that out, at just foundational level, those pieces. And then I also think, Sammy, I look at like my total budget, and I think, how much of my total budget can I even reasonably allocate to technology? Because I got a lot of resourcing to do, and how much of it am I going to tie up in something that is static, like technology?
Before we move on, because you mentioned AI, and we're going to talk about AI a little bit, because everyone would log off if we didn't. So
save the best for us.
Yeah. So let's talk about the foundation. I just put it in the chat, right? Like, these are the things that like you might want to look at, and Sammy's kind of like on top of that, saying like, figure out what your problems are, like where you need to focus, right? Like, let's call that like the, I don't know, umbrella or whatever. Let's talk about integrations, because there is out of the box and there is custom, and there's a whole lot of crap in between. So when you're evaluating tools for integrations, because the ATS is not on the chopping block, right? In some cases. And the question was posed, like, how do you evaluate tools? Like, as a consumer, how do I go in and ask the right questions and do the right things to make sure that I'm buying the right tools?
So we're all recruiters on this call. So we do reference checks when we make key hires, right? I think that's just a huge piece of this, right? Like, especially you need to kind of reach out to your community of TA leaders to understand how are they using this tool and implementing it. Do you need it for the problems you're solving, and all of that? I mean, reference checks are huge. I mean, I think of, again, there have been so many times I've made the mistake of, getting a tool and not asking, how was implementation? What was that like? Who are the implementation managers you want implementing this tool with your company too? That is something that I think is a huge part of actually the decision to get the tool and then, implement it.
Sammy, what if, because as recruiters, we also, I think, like to get ahead of the competition. And so, like, that's why there are so many startups out there. And I'm thinking tech and services startups anyway, but what if they don't have referenceable clients at this point? I mean, like, I would actually take that, not as it really depends on your threshold for vendor management, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. How much bandwidth do you have? And you say, all right, well, listen, so you don't have any referenceable clients. Okay. Well, then I'm going to need this discounted. And I'm going to need like the premium customer success package for free. and I'm willing to like co-innovate with you. I'm willing to try, but like I'm going to need these assurances. So there's like that, I would say, just not to counter what you're saying, but to expand a bit like into some of this zone, like some of the space that we get into with the world. There's just so much innovation in our space right now. I also, I'm an RFP girl. Like I love to put a spreadsheet of requirements together. And I know that is not a natural language for a lot of people. It almost starts to feel like technical writing, which is like dry as it comes. And I'm a fantasy novel nerd, so I'm like trying to live in fantasy land. But anyway, I digress. I really do like to organize my thoughts, and really think about what do I know that we need. Oh, and guess what? At that stage, when I'm trying to map out what do I need, I'm going to start to bring in, going back to this question about change management, I'm going to go and bring in representative personas from the hiring manager group and from IT and from recruiting, from the recruiter seat and, the sourcer seat. I'm going to start to bring folks in to get them to share ideas and to feel like they are starting to contribute to that solution design that, and I think it just starts to help get us on the same page. Because then guess what? You start to prioritize those requirements, right? And sometimes that means you eliminate some, right? And it starts to just get people to see in the room like, well, guess what? We can't have it all. So here's how we're going to start to work it out. Just gets people more involved in that solutioning. And so I feel like it starts to seed a bit of that change management, the championing that you need. But for me, I want to be crystal clear on what we're going to go out to market to get.
Yeah. Kyle, wow, we're both Cancers. I also love fantasy novels more than anything else.
Let me grab one.
Yes, I finished the series actually.
Oh yeah, well, finished what there is so far.
Yeah. Sorry, we're actually not going to talk about recruiting. We're just going to start a book club.
I was going to say, should that be our last topic?
What books are you? All right, so let's talk about AI. I'm going to try to not talk about anything around AI that people have heard a billion times, although I'm sure we will fail at that. What I do want to talk about is, and I know we've done entire webinars on this, but like when it comes to like recruiting technology, Sammy, I love that you said like this tool looks the same as it did 5 years ago. If you aren't innovating, then you're not going to help me stay ahead of the curve either, right? So that's one big thing that we can look at. But in terms of AI and either the recruiting technology that you currently have or that you're looking to get, what are you looking for in terms of automation, AI, innovation? Like what are some key things that folks can be looking at to either offboard or onboard new tools?
I can start. I mean, it's interesting because for us with clinician hiring, there's so much nuance in it. And I think with AI, what's been tricky, is there's still, there's not a lot of transparency in how AI is making decisions and potentially some bias built in. And so as I think of AI and kind of how we would presumably use it in the future, yeah, it is for those lower level tasks, right? Where there feels like there's redundancy again in the process. And so just kind of looking across the board, looking at your end-to-end process for recruiting and where can AI sort of, disposition effectively, where can it kind of do things that still leave a positive experience for candidates? Because I think that, again, is top of mind for me, because I do think about that often of, again, we see on the flip side, AI writing resumes and answering application questions. And I'm like, oh, and so I think in receiving that as a candidate, just being aware of how that lands and how that feels as candidates. So, we, again, haven't taken in any sort of approach in using AI, but, as we're looking at exploring, obviously it's lower level tasks effectively, weeding out candidates. And it would be awesome one day if there was an AI scheduling tool. Again, that seems to me the biggest pain point for many of us of like scheduling, interviews and logistics. But as I sort of think of AI, that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, automating manual tasks, eliminating duplicative work, those types of things, for sure.
I look at it a little differently, a little more abstractly. And because there are many, countless use cases in talent acquisition now. And I think you know what problems are you blocking you, or slowing you down, or areas that you need to resource that you'll never get headcount for. Like with a $40,000 tool, you might get to just like interview scheduling, and then suddenly that just moves so much faster, right? I think about AI though in terms of three different aspects. AI, if I'm trying to think about what do we need, I look at the potential impact of the use case. So that goes like, what problem are we going to solve? I also look at the complexity of this use case. So I talk about interview scheduling. Well, you ask your interview scheduling like prospective provider, like, can you support our 12 different interviews? And they'll say, yeah. But what they aren't telling you is the level of access to like your Microsoft 365 that they're going to need to actually like get calendar access to like do all this, right? And so that could introduce complexity to that use case that like I wasn't considering. If TA doesn't have a lot of pull with IT, then guess what? I'm going to get all the way to that finish line and it's not going to work. And it's like, okay. So impact, complexity. And then the last, which is where a lot of us get stuck, is risk. And I know that we all think about like the compliance risk, and bias risk, but there are other types of risk too, which are things like your own internal governance. Like, are we at risk of violating any SLAs? Or, do we actually have a really high, like we have a moderate tolerance for risk for different things. But I also think about risk, like in terms of like ethics, like I really look at like, how would this change? What risk does this run of changing our recruiting culture? If for example, and I have literally seen people implement this intentionally, if a candidate never speaks to a human being until they've made it all the way through an assessment stage, like they've never talked to anybody, and you've asked them for at least an hour and a half of their time, not even in one day, like over the course of multiple, like fully automating it all, like, well, I think we might actually we run the risk of not getting the best candidates in the door anymore, right? So those three things, because all the rest, it's subjective. It's whatever you want, whatever you need, whatever's on fire. Well, persistent problems, not just, the fire du jour. But I just feel like that helps us to get a bit more intentional. And, you weigh those things, right? If it's high impact and low risk and low complexity, but it is like kind of a powerful and advanced use case, I'm actually all for it. I'm going to go give it a shot. If it's low impact, high risk, what's the point? So I think about it that way.
No notes for either of you. Thank you for saying all of those. So we have about, 5-6 minutes before we wrap, and I'm saving the best stuff for last. So all 82 of you watching, don't hang up.
8,200. Don't blow us up. We love each and every one of you.
All equally. So we have folks that are on legacy systems, obviously innovation, and having a modern stack and like all of these things are like floating around, right? But like my system was born, back in the year 1996. I don't know. So how do folks who are on legacy systems, like how do you marry old tech with newer tech? Like, Sammy, I don't know if you've been in this position. I know you've been at One Medical for a long time, so I'm sure there was some legacy stuff in there that maybe needed to be replaced. Kyle, you might have seen this in the market as well, but just curious for folks who are out there with legacy systems and looking to innovate and upgrade, what does that look like?
Yeah, we had legacy. We had a whole ATS that we had inherited that just wasn't working for us. And I guess my point with that is legacy systems is like, again, goes back to the point of like this TA in our job is hyper competitive. And again, if that system is not keeping you up with the times and not keeping you getting candidates, like I wouldn't be afraid to ask the question. And Kyle, I like how you are so the RFP queen there of just like going to market and evaluating other tools. Like I wouldn't be afraid to do that. And yes, looking at mirroring it. But I do think you make the mistake of just keeping a legacy tool because it's a legacy tool, and not looking at going to market with that. And because again, it's tough out there acquiring candidate. And I think candidates pick up on that too. I mean, like many of times people have said like, oh, I had to apply through this terrible system, or you had this, system. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And that in itself is something that, I think as TA leaders, we need to think about it. Is our brand matching our tech stack and the experience that candidates are having, and ensuring that stays top of mind with any type of tools you're, inheriting or taking on or considering consolidating.
That puts me in mind of like, when we talk about like quality of hire as an example, I'm starting to think more about like quality controls, because like we don't control the hiring decision, but what do we control that can impact quality of hire? And again, we don't always own process, right? We don't always own, there's a lot that we don't own. And so I do try to think about if I'm on a legacy HCM that has an old school ATS. And I mean, I've worked at places where we had one apply process, whether you were an executive vice president candidate or whether you were an hourly like warehouse worker. And what could we do? Well, in the executive environment, you white glove that. Like the executive recruiters, they're going to complete that application process for that candidate, right? And we made that work. They didn't need to touch that piece. On the front line, what we oftentimes would do is we would have a lot of, hiring events are still really successful, and so we would be there and we would train all of our recruiters and all of our helpers for the day that, look, most of these people they're not coming in with laptops, right? They're going to apply for this on their phone. Thankfully, the experience was mobile enabled, but it was still clunky as hell, right? But we would coach them like, do not lose patience with these people. They're going to get frustrated. They're here trying to show their best, and this is going to be a big barrier for them. So I'm not trying to solve that tech problem with more tech. I actually am leaning into, now is the time for the people to shine, right? And for us to rally around, like, because look, we have all in our own lives dealt with like shitty tech, right? That it's work tech. Like we don't get consumerized experiences from everything. And so I think it's kind of like figuring out where can I augment by like with people and with a cultural like flex, and where can I actually build a business case for an hourly apply flow, even in the same ATS. Like, please just give me something different, something more simplified. It is trying to just be, when you're thinking about solutioning problems, tech is only one part. And I think that I'm happy to see all this innovation in our space. I'm happy to see all these different providers, because there are a lot of different ways to skin a cat. Really horrible metaphor I don't want to ever use again, but but you know what I'm saying? Like there's just, we can't go straight to tech, and we've had this tendency to do it, like go buy a new tool to solve the new problem. I really like us going to foundational piece first and thinking about what we might be able to do instead.
Gotcha. Well, for the 878 people watching, all of your Gmail notifications have gone off for your next meeting in 10 minutes. So I'm going to start to wrap us up. Kyle, Sammy, if the folks watching were like, what do I take away from this conversation? Like if I had 10 minutes with Kyle and Sammy, here's the takeaway from either of you. What would you want folks to walk away with, Sammy?
Oh gosh, let me think about it. Kyle, do you want to go first? I feel like I've been going first, so I want to.
You have. The burden is, I'm going to take that burden and put it on my own shoulders and buy time as I think about it. I think the big thing to take away is, in truth, this is from the heart, y'all. The work is hard. It sometimes, like day by day, it might get easier. I think that now more than ever, we need to remember that we are a team. like TA as a team, take care of each other, take care of your managers, take care of your leaders. They are doing their best, even if it doesn't always seem like it. There's a big burden on them too. I think it's just like we really, as a culture, need to come back together and feel a little bit more united. Because whether we're talking about bloated tech stacks or constant firefighting, again, going back to those like quality controls, there's only so much that we can do. And one thing we certainly can do is like band together and to be like, you know what, bad day, but we got this. We're going to get through. So.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll echo that too. I mean, I also just think these are really complex problems, and each business has their own thing to solve when it comes to recruiting talent and getting talent and using tech stacks. So, again, don't think you're crazy when you're running into these things and you're thinking, is this just me? It's not just you. I mean, we're all seeing it in our line of work. And yeah, plus one to what Kyle said, like we're a team. And so I think reaching out to your TA community and your managers and your people that are actually using the technology, doing the work, is crucial now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
Yeah. If you guys haven't connected with Sammy or Kyle, go find them on LinkedIn and hug the heck out of them because they're very, very smart people and they care, which is why I had them as a part of this conversation. And if there are things that come up, you can always email me, Brandice at Gem, and I will try to solve all of your problems as well, because that is my main goal here with WTF in recruiting, is to have conversations that actually help you. So if there's other stuff you want to hear about, talk about, need a little therapy session, hit me up. I've got you covered. And with that, I will say have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you at the next WTF.
Thanks, Brandice. Thanks, everybody. So nice to be able to have this opportunity.
Thanks,
everybody. This was so fun. See you on LinkedIn. Bye.